Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Michigan College Earth Day 50.5. If you're just tuning in, thanks for joining. This session this morning is integrating sustainability and environmental justice into curriculum and student activities on and off campus. Our moderator this morning is Michelle Gibbs, Director for the Office of Sustainability with Hope College. Our panelists include Dr. Denise Keele, the Associate Professor of Political Science and Environmental and Sustainability Studies with Western Michigan University. She's also the chair of the Climate Change Working Group and faculty co-chair of WeVote. Dr. Geoffrey Habron, a Professor of Sustainability Sciences, Furman University. And Dr. Silvia Secchi, Associate Professor of Geographical and Sustainability Sciences with the University of Iowa. Michelle, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. We are really excited to have this panel here together today. So Rose did a little bit of an introduction for everybody. So at this point, I'm going to just kind of introduce myself. So I'm the director for the Office of Sustainability at Hope College. And I'm just so excited to be here today and to be a part of this event. It's been ever since kind of COVID shut down things back in April. All the sustainability people in Michigan have been kind of meeting regularly. And so this is just one of the fun ways that we are starting to work together and just kind of work collaboratively on sustainability issues in Michigan and therefore around the world too. So with that, I'm going to start introducing our panelists. And then once I say all of their names, then I'll give them each a little bit of time to kind of go through some of the projects and initiatives that they're working on in their classes in terms of integrating sustainability and environmental justice into the curriculum and also student activities around on their campuses. So with that, we have Dr. Denise Keele, Associate Professor of Political Science and Environmental and Sustainability Studies at Western. And then we also have Dr. Silvia Secchi, Associate Professor of Geographical Studies and Sustainability Sciences at University of Iowa, and Geoffrey Habron, Professor of Sustainability Sciences from Furman University. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise at this point. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this great forum. Thank you, Michelle, for moderating us today. I want to say I am representing so many wonderful colleagues today that all could be on this stage talking about our programs and our classes, and I hope to do my best to represent them. As was said, I'm a joint appointment, so that's one kind of way that we at Western Michigan University think about these issues. I'm jointly appointed with Political Science and the Institute Environment Sustainability. Joint appointments are a common thing for us to be able to achieve those goals in one of the oldest, we hope, environmental studies programs in the US. I also coordinate our climate change working group on campus. And as was mentioned, I coordinate our WeVote, our voter registration, education, nonpartisan efforts, as well as help run a couple community organizations. Again, one focused on climate change, the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, and I'm also a current board member of our Kalamazoo Nature Center. So I hope to be able to talk about how all of those pieces go together today.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like a wealth of knowledge flows through you and experiences. So we're so excited to have you here today. Thank you. And then we'll introduce Dr. Secchi as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this panel and to hear what other people's experiences have been. For me, I came to interdisciplinarity and sustainability science from a strong disciplinary perspective. I'm trained as an economist, but I started doing a lot of interdisciplinary work after my degree. And so this happened organically and through time. And so I bring to the table many years of research, interdisciplinary research based in the place where I live. So I consider myself a place-based geographer, in the sense that I studied the systems, the environmental issues, the social issues of the upper Midwest. So this is like where I'm coming from, both in terms of like my research experience, my interdisciplinary approach, and the being able to use examples in case studies and stories that the students at my institution can relate to, because they reflect part of their own experience as well.
Wonderful. It sounds like, again, a wealth of information coming through you. And it really seems like it hits in on that triple bottom line where you're bringing in the economics and social and the environmental pieces. So we're excited to have you on today's panel as well. And with that, we will introduce our third and final panelist today, Geoffrey Hebron.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Geoffrey Hebron. I'm a professor of sustainability sciences in the Department of Earth, Environmental, and Sustainability Science at Furman University. We're in Greenville, South Carolina, and I've been here since the fall of 2017. We have two majors in our department: Earth and Environmental Sciences as a major, and then Sustainability Science as a major. Prior to that, I spent 15 years at Michigan State University with a joint appointment in fisheries and wildlife and sociology. And while there, we started a specialization in sustainability in my last 3 years while I was there. So I've been trained in natural resources and more on the community-based natural resources side of things, which led to my joint appointment in sociology. And then we started the sustainability program there. But Furman is one of the few liberal arts colleges that actually has a Bachelor's of Science in Sustainability Science.
Wonderful. Well, I'm a MSU grad myself and went through the RISE program, so I know that there's a lot of familiar faces around here. So that's really great. So with that, we're going to jump into a few pre-planned questions that you all had a chance to kind of reflect on previously, and then we will open it up to Q&A options for our participants to be able to submit some questions for you guys as well. So I think we'll just kind of have a raise of hands if you want to kind of take the first stab at the question, but we'll make sure that we work through our ways between all three of you to have some time to answer the question, if that works out okay. All right, so our first question is, what is the process for adding environmental justice and sustainability into your curriculum or your student activities on your particular campus? And I know we have liberal arts as well as state colleges on this panel, so it'd be great to be able to show how those differences might come into play as well. So who'd like to take the first crack at the question?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I would just say that personally for me, we can't do sustainability without social justice and social equity. So it's always been a constant to me of like, oh, why do you have to have this as a separate thing? And what I really was drawn to when it came to Furman University is we use Kate Raworth's sustainability donut model. And it explicitly looks at sustainability as trying to find that sweet spot between meeting social foundations, one of which specifically is social equity, but gender equity, and then without exceeding planetary boundaries. And so for our students, when they look at this sustainability donut, we always come back to it and you look all the sectors that cover across it. And so if you're not dealing with social equity, then you're not really achieving sustainability. So great, you've got climate change. Yes, we've reduced pollution. We don't have eutrophication, but until we meet the needs of people and specifically around the social component, that you're not really doing it. So for us, it just has to be there. I think the difference has been social equity is typically the part that's left off. So coming to Furman, I started a class on sustainability and social justice. And again, it seems kind of weird to like pull that out separately, but because typically it gets left out, we just felt it made the most sense to say we need a course specifically dealing with social justice and social equity where we can address environmental justice head on. And it's not, oh, we got, here's a lecture on this, or here's one project or homework assignment.
I'll jump in there. Yeah, thanks, Geoffrey. That's exactly it. So this, process for adding environmental justice and sustainability to your curriculum, from those of us that work on these issues, this is the bottom line. As Michelle mentioned, the triple bottom line. And so it really is about an integrative process at Western Michigan University. Again, our environmental studies program started in 1972 at the height of the Western civilization's, environmental movement. And it was faculty from across different disciplines coming together and saying, hey, we're all doing this environment piece. How could we do it better together? And that has really evolved over these 40 plus years with a still standing coordinate major. So our students double major in environmental and sustainability studies and something else. And so that really brings in this wealth of diversity. And so really curriculum comes from the faculty, right, as sort of Geoffrey is talking about, and making sure that we are connected to all of our other units. Our College of Business has its own sustainability ethics program, right? Our geology program and our geographers, everybody has a piece to add to this. And so we really see at Western our role being able to provide that hub to bring all those interested faculty together. And we do the same thing with our Western Michigan University Climate Change Working Group. It started as a call through our interdisciplinary Center for the Humanities, right, of all things, right, thinking about justice, thinking about people. Driving all of us is this deep moral concern for the effects on people and vulnerable populations. And so there was a call for, hey, who's teaching climate change? And all these folks came together in 2012 and started that group. And a lot of that is volunteer work, I will say, right? So it's a lot of faculty who are very, very interested in making sure these issues get into our curriculum. And we also have a great Office for Sustainability. I know, Michelle, that's your role in helping us track all of these courses and how many sustainability courses do we have, and putting them in our general education. And what we now call Western Essential Studies has been a really key way to make sure we're reaching all of our students, or as many students as possible. So those would just be a few things I would highlight from our programs.
So for me, my experience has been incredibly, I feel incredibly lucky, because as I was coming back to Iowa from my previous job in Illinois, the department got a new major in sustainability. And so we got to start the major from the ground up and really think through this issue that Geoffrey was talking about. Like, you really want to have social justice embedded rather than an add-on. And so, for example, so we've been able to do that in the progression of classes, from the more intro classes that are also gen eds to the more major focused classes, scaffolding, right? The concepts in using readings. I think that the books are behind the instructors on many introductory courses in terms of really embedding social justice and presenting a more diverse view of what sustainability is, that fully incorporates, for example, the perspectives of Indigenous people, of Native Americans, or of people in other parts of the world, and how they see and perceive sustainability, and how we can really listen to their voices and their perspectives. So we've really been able to essentially, instead of, retrofitting, right, is often more expensive than building from scratch. And so we've been able to build from scratch on some of these concepts, and really, I make a very conscious effort to think about decolonizing my curriculum from the ground up, using the right reading, so that we don't always listen to old white man as the voice of wisdom, the guys who have written the things that must be read. So I feel very fortunate that I came in as the major was essentially coming online. And so I've had a lot of latitude in thinking about how to make it, truly incorporate environmental justice in it.
Thank you. And yeah, I totally agree. I think that the social piece of sustainability is one that typically gets overlooked between the three. I mean, economics definitely is a major driver in a lot of decision making. I think environmental is starting to get there. And now I think social justice, especially in light of recent events and things like that, is starting to get a little bit more traction, which has been great. But it's certainly something that we need to be prepared to equip future leaders in. So appreciate all of the work that you guys are doing with that. So our next question is, in your opinion, what can we do to enhance environmental justice within our students' curriculums or activities while attending their college or university? Anyone? Okay, Denise, go ahead.
Well, I'll kick things off because something Silvia said, I want to just piggyback and highlight and uplift the idea of calling, a place-based geographer. And so I would say one of the things we can do to really enhance environmental justice with our own students. Silvia, you mentioned, your use of case studies, and many of our faculty are doing the same things. I mean, right here in Kalamazoo, we have the largest inland oil spill on the Kalamazoo River that happened from Enbridge, and those property owners are of varying class and socioeconomic status along the river that were then affected, right? And so utilizing that experience is huge. Of course, we're in Michigan. Yesterday in environmental law, I just taught the Flint drinking water crisis and those plaintiffs winning a constitutional violation of their rights, right? Again, mostly African-American and minority populations in Flint. We've been able to work with students to help pass emergency declarations of climate in our community that all make sure that we are working on our vulnerable populations. One of our biggest impacts, of course, is going to be flooding, and folks who live in that flood zone, again, fall into our vulnerable populations. And so I really think it is this idea of bringing that place-based, the things that are happening in the students' lives that we can see. And that's been one of the best ways, I think, to bring in the justice aspect.
Yeah, agreed. And I also think it's important to fit in with the institutional place, both the physical place and the geographical place, but also whatever the initiatives are within. I've been at 3 different institutions, and I think it's important to sort of fit in and understand what are the thrusts, the initiatives, the strategic way, the mission of an institution, instead of saying, hey, everyone, hey, look at sustainability over here. I mean, that's important, but it's also like if you're going to fit it in with students and how they engage with the world, I would imagine Hope College does it a little differently than Western, that does it a little different than University of Iowa. And I also think if there is some big initiative at Furman, we have the Furman advantage. And so that becomes the currency, the coin of the realm. Is like, how can you provide applied learning and undergraduate research and internships? And so if our program doesn't fit with that, then that's not the message that students are getting. And so I think I'm absolutely about the place-based, but just adding to that of saying it's also culturally, institutionally, organizationally, it's important because that's what the students are hearing with admissions. That's what they're going to hear when they show up in the residence halls. And so if you can infuse that into that, then I think it makes it easier, more palatable for students to consume. Or the general education curriculum. And I forget who mentioned, your intro classes are all part of the general education curriculum. That's the same with us. So a student, I don't really know what this is, but I needed so many credits and boom, I'm in SUS 120. And then next thing you know, oh, I guess I am learning about sustainability. So
I would add to what Geoffrey just said, that to me, what is really important is that this is an organic process. So there are things that I know, right, that are part of my research expertise. And so I always try to build on those so that it's not like being plopped from the sky, right? So you want to find that sweet spot between the institution, your own research expertise, and where you're at geographically, right? So that it's organic and it makes sense. So, I study the environmental impacts of agriculture. I study food systems. And so I don't talk about, mining, for example, which is really important, but it's not something that I have expertise on or that doesn't really fit with my geography. So try and essentially build on our strengths as individuals, as institutions, as bodies of students in an organic way so that we're not, one of the things I really don't like is like helicopter academics, right? I don't like people who go places and do a little thing and then they disappear. And so I really think it's important that we build on our collective and individual strengths as institutions, programs, individuals to teach these things in ways that are really deep and rich and connected with place.
I think those are all very valid points, especially this idea of developing it organically, because when people are able to develop that personal connection, I feel like they have a lot stronger drive to want to see those changes happen. And so I think that that's a big driver within all of that kind of stuff. So thank you. Our third question is, what are some keys to stimulating students to get involved? Students are overburdened these days, and especially now with COVID. I mean, in terms of engaging them, they're kind of Zoom called out these days. I know from Hope's perspective, we've been trying to do a few smaller groups of like getting them out and doing like cleanup events and some different things like that, but still trying to do it within safe numbers. So how have you guys done that in the past? And also I'd be interested in post-COVID times, or while we're living in COVID times. So thank you.
Well, I'll start, and I'll say that I think one of the things that people don't realize is that I'm actually an Iowa State graduate, so I came to Iowa from Europe almost 25 years ago to get my degree. And then I lived in Iowa and then moved to Illinois, and I'm back in Iowa. And I think people don't realize how many more commitments students have because of the higher cost of tuition. Almost all my students have at least a part-time job. All sorts of other obligations, whether it's family obligations, things that they need to keep track of. And so I try to proceed being mindful of their time and really listening to them. So throughout the semester, adjusting activities, changing the slant of things that we do, and do as much as possible during class time, or at least starting, for example, an assignment in class, so that I am able to go gentle on the demands on their time, and I am responsive to, I just to give you an example, at the very beginning of the semester, for my really large class that has over 400 students, the students were really interested in this idea that the creation of national parks in the US was not just a magnificent, right, manifest destiny thing, but it involved the expropriation and the chasing away of Native Americans in iconic parks like Yosemite and Yellowstone. And so they were really interested in this at the beginning of the semester. And so I designed an activity for them to do in the middle of the semester when we were talking about land resources that address that issue. So this responsiveness, I think it's really important to see what catches their eye, what they're interested in, so that we don't just just come out and just, tell them the story without listening to their feedback.
So yeah, absolutely. I agree with all that. And from the previous question, I want to echo the institutionalization of this at the mission university level. And I should acknowledge, we just last year passed a land acknowledgement statement, for example. So starting every meeting, and our president, whenever he addresses folks, having that land acknowledgement out there. But I think the case study thing that we talked about is one way to make sure students are getting engaged, because these are the things about where they live. But I think, Silvia, you're absolutely right. It's about listening to where our youth are, and they're coming in right now with an interest in sustainability and climate change, right? They get it. And they really, in my view, the biggest question I get asked is, what can I do? They want action items. And so really trying to provide some of that experiential learning or abilities to connect with some of our community groups that, like you said, Michelle, get them out doing a cleanup. That one of our Lee Honors College incoming classes, their big idea was to work with our Latinx community on climate change, right? Are we actually translating everything into Spanish? Are we working with those populations specifically who are going to be hit harder? So I think it is listening as well as providing some real actions. This this new group of students, they want to know what to do. And I think that to address the COVID piece, Michelle, with everything online and being digital, I have learned an amazing amount from our students about Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, and them being able to provide that resource to us through our action items. And I know this is Earth Day 50.5. I'm very proud of our students and community who pulled off a whole week of digital Earth Week back in actual April to be able to pull together some how-to videos as well as kind of regular talks. So I think there are still ways that we can have that action involvement. And this generation, I really see, again, I always get asked, yeah, but what can I do right now?
Yeah, I actually think this is the biggest challenge I've faced. Like I said, I've been at 3 different institutions, and to me, this is always the challenge I have faced. Even with engaged students, is trying to find things. So we really try to work on this idea of scaffolding. I believe Silvia had mentioned that before. So we're working off of this applied scaffolded learning model. And so by the time our students come out of the major as a senior, they're going to have to pick a thesis, which is more of a research project, and a practicum, which is more of an applied project. And what we realize is that over the course of 3 years, students aren't necessarily ready to engage in such ways. And so we have to sort of build them up to that capacity to think about collaborative competency. What does that look like? And so we've tried to weave it in from the introductory class and bringing the world in. And so, with a case study or something like that. But definitely, I think for the students to take this beyond the classroom setting, it does take a little bit of an effort to do so beyond just an academic exercise. I think working with student organizations helps because they're already motivated to be a part of that organization, whether it's an environmental organization or social justice organization or NAACP. And so partnering with those organizations, I think, is helpful because they already generate that energy, and the students aren't necessarily doing it for a grade or for something else. They're driven by an interest. And so I think personally, that's where, like I said, that's the challenge I have, because we can introduce these projects as in a class, and then I'm like, the next time I'm like, okay, what are we going to do with this? And students have scattered. And it's always disappointing because they've done the work during the semester to sort of set up to do something, but in an authentic way. You can't like package something up in 15 weeks and then, we're going to go work with the community and get it done. And to be authentic, to Silvia's point, not just we're going to do a project, we're going to show up in New Washington Heights, do something and then leave. It's like, no, if I'm going to work with New Washington Heights, I'm working with New Washington Heights. And so how do I weave that in, even with a different set of students, because we're committed to working and addressing that issue.
Great. Yeah, I think that's one of the hard things as a four-year institution. I mean, we have our students who are changing over. I mean, whether it's in a semester into a different class or going on and graduating. So you have to have that continuous building up of students and keeping the momentum going with different projects and things like that. So very, very valid points. So our next question is, how do you recommend working with other faculty, classes, or departments on campus to create a holistic approach for students within their other courses and activities? Do you encourage them to pull in some of the work from their other classes and things like that?
I think this is where having other entities on campus and the university support. And I know at Western, we already talked about that. At Furman, we have the SHI Institute for Sustainable Communities. And so that becomes that hub across campus, and it's not about what your discipline is. And so we have faculty affiliates from 15, 20 different departments where we're able to get together and talk and share ideas. I was able to partner with a faculty member in communications last spring. And so I'm teaching resilience and adaptation. He's got a course on advocacy. And so we came up with this way to where we could kind of work together through a shared lab space where, we could learn about what does it mean to be an advocate. And there's a theory and there's concepts. And then their students are like, well, I'm a communications major. Like, how do I apply it to something? Oh, we've got some content for you. But all that is facilitated because we have this institute called the SHI Institute that brings people together, a couple times a month to brainstorm ideas on how you can collaborate. And so, so I think that it's just a rich thing to have as a campus, and I really value that. In addition, like I said, to the initiatives that we have on campus anyway, but to have that institute be that way to do that. And then we also, with Michigan State, but then also here at Furman, we have the Faculty Development Center. And those folks also are very helpful because we can talk about things that cut across majors, cut across disciplines. And yes, we need to have more active learning, or we want to do more authentic assessment. Again, we can work across departments and disciplines and come up with ideas to say, you know what, even if you're an English major, an art major, we can come up with some of these concepts and ideas that cut across. And some of us, like us, might be 100% on it, but some other courses might be 25% or 5%, but it's a way that we can collaborate. So I give kudos to the non-academic centers on campuses that serve as a hub. And if people haven't looked to those, I would encourage folks to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Geoffrey. Everything you said there. Again, at Western, our environment and sustainability program started as a joint faculty program, and now there are 100% faculty just in that program. Some of us are still joint, but having that faculty interdisciplinary team to really discuss and build these programs. My colleagues will be happy to know we just finished a curriculum approval for scaffolding. So we're redeveloping our curriculum. I would be loath if I didn't point out my colleagues' hard work on that today. But we found a few other things successful. Again, partnering with our Office for Sustainability, because that's who's, we're connected through the ASHE, of course, and doing all the tracking and the reporting through STARS. It's really, really important to do that. We've had some success in making sure, we work with other departments and faculty in cross-listing those courses, right? Because everybody is thinking about student credit hours and how the numbers look at the end of the day. And so cross-listing has been a really unique way to do that, as well as trying to institutionalize encouragement of team teaching, right? That's so valuable. Our intro climate change course is team taught, and we bring in all of the different disciplines into that course. And so, each of you would get a week to bring in that content so that we all learn, right? So after, 8 years of working with these folks, I've learned a lot about the science and the psychology and novels about climate change that I never would have experienced. So I think having those sorts of hubs where interdisciplinary faculty can get together is crucial. And I want to mention one other thing that we tried this last year, and it was very successful, and I think we'll keep doing. From our climate change working group, faculty also needs support. And it's hard to, build a new course and design something and get into a curriculum. So we put out a call with just a little bit of financial support for a teaching fellow so that they could take that time to actually develop a new course in climate change. And we were stunned at the responses that we got, and are going to have a new course in gender and women's studies on women and climate change and activism, from philosophy on refugees, right? And so just having that ability to really have systems where you can work together and the faculty can interact, I think is huge.
Yeah, I have to agree with all that's been said so far. And just for example, the reason why I'm here today is because of our Office of Sustainability that does a lot of things on our campus, and it's really a driving force in getting students engaged and making everybody understand what is going on at different levels, both in terms of like pesticide use, climate audit. They are really an awesome resource, and they on a variety of things. And so I'm here because the Office of Sustainability Director hooked me up with you guys, with the Big Ten, Office of Sustainability group. So I agree that what we need to do to enhance these hubs and these interdisciplinary approaches, requires us to rethink how the academy works at a larger scale, right? How we value contributions. So one of my big shticks is, for example, that creating original teaching materials, peer-reviewed teaching materials, open access teaching materials should be rewarded in the tenure process so that we don't separate artificially research from teaching and pedagogy. They should really be woven together, right? And we should reward these interdisciplinary collaborations, reward papers written with other people. For example, at my previous institution, the forestry department divided up the value of a paper by the number of co-authors. So if you had 3 co-authors, that was only a third of a paper for your tenure process, right? So changing these silos and changing these perspectives is really what we need to, changing the institutions from the inside so that they're, you know, they're not like little rooms, right? But it's kind of like more of an open space where people can collaborate more and be rewarded for it is really the critical point for me.
Can I just echo that? Because it really is important at these institutional level structures to, it's still more time, and process wise, there are challenges to even doing what I'm talking about with cross-listing a course and having multiple instructors, and Silvia's absolutely right, who gets credit for that, and how are we going to make sure that we're all being successful. And there are a lot of barriers still to this interdisciplinary approach. Even if we are committed to that, there are still a lot of things institutionalized that we need to work on so that we get the credit for that. Because I can also tell you, the pros of that network and the collaborations are amazing, but it does take more time, right? When we're sitting in those meetings together and trying to learn from each other, and what does your discipline bring, and how should we be working that in, it takes a long time, because I might not understand what my colleague is even trying to tell me for an hour, right? Until we all get it and can understand. So sometimes the output takes a lot longer in those situations. And just one other piece on the sort of economy, Silvia, since I know you got this background in economics now, one thing I'd like to plug for our own Office for Sustainability, how that got started was the students, our student government actually voted in to charge a fee on themselves, right? A small $8 a semester in order to fund that office. And all of that money is then used to direct the office, and most of it gets put back into grants that students write to do things on campus that enhance our own sustainability or justice and climate change. And so I think those are the kinds of models that we can think about to continue to promote interdisciplinary things. But I just wanted to echo that without the resources and support for these things, it can be more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely needs to be that institutional buy-in to be able to be supportive of our faculty for doing all of these things that go the extra mile to really make the impact with the students. I mean, because if we have that time where we can actually sit in and really learn from each other, that just makes the opportunity for the students that much stronger and that much more impactful. So I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing in making that stuff happen. So it sounds great. So our next question, what resources do you frequently use, or what resources do you use frequently to assist you with your work and stay up to date on the latest topics? So lots of stuff out there these days.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna start, since I shamelessly use a Michigan-based resource a lot for my teaching. I'm gonna give you kudos, guys. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the learngala.com, but I use their case studies, and I'll happily put the links in the chat. So if people want, they can look at the availability of case studies. So there are several places. The University of British Columbia has a really good library of open access case studies. This learngala.com is also amazing. I have used Succinct teaching workshop case studies. In fact, I've written one myself. I was in the inaugural group of the first workshop that they did. I think it was in 2012. And then I'm going to try not to botch this. The National Library for the Use of Case Study, National Center for Case Study Teaching in Science at the University of Buffalo, which is peer reviewed. And again, I've published teaching materials there. So my whole shtick is open access, peer review, and let's learn from each other. The succinct guys, this year I'm using quite a few succinct case studies. I've actually contacted the authors. My students are giving them feedback for extra credit on their case study. So I really can't stand for-profit publishers when it comes to teaching materials. I think they prey on us and our students, and I'm all in favor of developing our own materials, sharing them, improving them as a community. And it's a practice that reflects our beliefs, right? It's a way to show how we do things by doing them.
And by doing it collaboratively. I mean, I think that's the big thing. So thank you. Right,
Well,
Denise?
I'll jump in there. So thank you for all those resources. I can't wait to steal from all of your wonderful ideas there and find even more case studies. I think it's interesting. We're all big fans of that approach in some way. But there's so many resources out there. One of the things actually our groups were just sort of talking about is I don't know how to answer this question, but we were talking about how we should answer this question. And I think there's a couple ideas. Again, we rely on each other, right? The faculty and the students, and working together. I rely on my science colleagues to keep me up to date. And so one of the ways that we can do that is we regularly host public talks, right? And so through our other external groups, we're giving public talks all the time. And that, I think, really helps all of us in going to each other's materials and talks and giving guest lectures in these courses. You really do then start to learn, what exactly should I pay attention from the UN Sustainable Development Goals and what's going on, or the IPCC and a latest report that's coming out. For myself, I use Yale program on climate communication is one of the best resources that I use in my teaching, updated polls, all sorts of wonderful things. And we also host a book club. So we all read a book a month together, and we sort of all decide what that topic is going to be to try to keep ourselves really, really updated on, what's going on, what's the latest works. We just read Winning the Green New Deal in our climate change book club, for example, right? And so we can then have a discussion about that and really try to help each other stay updated. So I think it's this combination of relying on our colleagues. I'm a political scientist, and they expect me to be able to tell them about polls and elections and how all these policies work. And I rely on my other colleagues to keep us up to date on other items. And I think giving those talks and having those guest lectures in each other's courses, and I think our book club does a really nice job of that, actually.
Yeah, I guess I use two main things. One is professional organizations and listservs. So I'm a member of a range of folks, whether it's environmental sociology or Society for Food and Human Values or American Association of Adaptation Professionals. And so that stuff is happening. Some people don't like email, and I don't mind it. And so that stuff comes on a regular basis. And the other is keeping up with, which another one is not a huge thing, I guess, so much is media. And so going to news outlets and keeping track of both locally with our local newspaper, but also, the major publications, New York Times, Washington Post, BBC, National Public Radio. So I try to get both the academic side of things, but also what's going on in the world around me in real time, and then utilizing that. So it's quite frequently I have things that are planned, and I'm driving into work and it's like, boom, guess what we're going to talk about in class today, because this thing just popped up. It's not going to be in proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences yet. Or maybe it is because I subscribe to that. And again, it showed up in my email last night and I'm like, oh, I got to share this latest piece that just came out. Now the students probably could care less that this just came out, but I try to convey to them like, no, you don't understand. Like this just came out in PNAS. And so we're going to, talk about it. So I really try to keep things, this is as active as I possibly can and show them a range of resources that pop up to really keep things current. Even if we've assigned something or did a case study, I'm always like, okay, as of today, what's the latest information that's there? And some of it I plan out ahead. I know I'm going to go check and find out the latest. And others is like I said, so-and-so just published an article. They just released it on environmental social listserv. Oh, let me go track that down. Or somebody's given a panel talk at a conference, and again, oh, I'll just find that out. And I'm not actively trying to track that down, but passively it's coming through my email.
Has it been interesting for you in COVID times with all of this being digital, right? I mean, this is going to be my 5th digital conference, and I've got another one coming up, and having those things recorded. There's almost an interesting thing that's happened where we're able to maybe attend more of those kinds of, especially from our professional societies like you're sort of talking about, Geoffrey, at some sort of higher levels, because I find myself registering for all sorts of webinars these days, and then if I can't make it at 10 a.m. Wednesday, then because I registered, I get sent the recording and I am able to listen to that later and really bring it in. And so it's challenging, right? Because there's so much as everyone is doing what we call the digital pivot here in Kalamazoo that's out there. But in other ways, I'm actually able to maybe listen to more and broader talks than I ever would have before when I was going to be required to travel to that conference. So, and then I can provide those to our students, right? Hey, here's the recording of the candidate forum that we just held, or XYZ. And we didn't really have that resource in the past. So it's kind of like when email first started, Geoffrey. I'm not sure if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing that I have a whole list of recorded webinars in there.
And if I can add to these comments, one of the things that I'm very active on Twitter, and one of the things that has allowed me to do is really, I don't particularly care for the word, but curate my feed. And so I can listen to many more diverse voices on issues related to sustainable agriculture, on issues related to racism in the agricultural sector, right? And I can listen to people in other disciplines from different perspectives, other parts of the world, right? And so I think that means that I am making my space what I want it to look like, and I have more agency in the voices I listen to and then elevate. Whether it's in, oh, look, so-and-so has a new paper out that I can cite or use in class, right? Or this opportunity has come up. So again, this goes back to this collaborative, open access. Let's get away from the old kind of straitjacket model of who we listen to and in what modalities.
Great conversations. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out was that, I mean, and this is probably true in a lot of different sectors, but I think it's definitely particularly important in sustainability when you're looking at economics, environments, and social justice. You're looking back at historical things, you're looking at research methods, and then you're also trying to stay up to date on current events, because it's ever changing, and it's so present today, and something that just constantly changing. So I applaud you guys for bringing in all of these different areas and resources for students, because like I said, it's looking backwards, but it's also looking forward and kind of self-evaluation that way too. So that's great. Okay, so these next couple of questions are kind of future thinking questions. Denise, I know that you did need to leave us a little bit early. Are you still okay on time to go through a few more questions and then we'll...
Yeah, absolutely. I can be with you guys till 10:45, and then I'm going to make
Okay.
my colleagues here answer all the questions. So
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So again, these are kind of future thinking questions. So what do you think sustainability will look like within the classes on campuses in the next 5 years, 10 years, et cetera? So not, and obviously COVID has played a part in changing some of that, but as far as sustainability, what do you think that's going to look like for us going forward?
Well, if nobody starts, I'll start. I'll start by saying that I hope, and that's what I'm working on, is this idea that we will very firmly embed moral and justice issues in the teaching of sustainability. Sustainability will move away from this kind of like whitewashed, purely environmental, let's separate, let's ignore the needs, the issues that minorities face, the justice component of sustainability, that we will rebuild it as a concept that is just sustainability, right? That's a term that some authors have been using. And so that when we talk about sustainability, we embed this concept of justice from the start. And so it's a more inclusive concept that really deals with those social issues in a more profound way.
absolutely, I would echo that. And Geoffrey, I think earlier you started this panel talking about it's not just that they're interrelated crises that we're facing. It's the idea that if we do not address justice first and that piece of it, we will not actually solve climate change or achieve anything close to what we think we mean by sustainability. And so I think that I would even uplift that further and say there's not just even equality between disciplines right now, right? And how we continue to integrate them. If we look back right on the history of science and epistemology and this idea of the separation of disciplines, and that gained us a lot, right? We definitely have specialization of knowledge that is amazing. And I think it's very same thing when we look at where we are with sustainability. We've gained a lot of material wealth from the past practices of how we used to do things, at least some of us have. And I think that's an important thing to look at and say, we need to be looking back at this in a holistic way. We need to become Renaissance people again. And everyone should have a basic understanding of, yes, the science, right? And our natural and physical scientists and social science like me, but without also the humanities and the idea to bring in the true history and philosophy and justice and morality and what makes us human. Without that piece, I don't think that we will be able to achieve, again, solving climate change or truly addressing interdisciplinarity. And so that would be, I don't know if that's what it will actually look like is the question, but that would be my vision for what it must look like if we think we're really going to be doing anything at all. And maybe, right, again, the ways to do this is to work with and through each other. And so I would just add that piece. And I think our goal at Western, it would be my personal goal that every single student, staff, and community member was educated in that holistic frame. And again, all these different mechanisms to reach them. But it's got to be all three. And I think that moral and humanness has to lead that charge now. We do understand the science of many of these things enough to know what to do. These are now social and moral questions.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I've always viewed sustainability science as the ultimate liberal arts topic. And so I know Stephen posted something in the Q&A about like, how do you deal with disciplinary? And there's actually an organization called the Disciplinary Alliance for Sustainability, DANS. And so the professional organizations that are focusing on that. And so there is this idea of working across disciplines around sustainability. But yeah, my vision is that it just becomes something that's a part of every major, every discipline, and not like, oh, we're going to go take over the world. But it's just like, no, fundamentally, it has to be in it, because whether if you're in political science and you're not recognizing like this is the way international affairs, like how can you not do that without recognizing that, looking in the future and looking at future generations and trying to anticipate what future problems, that there are going to be this range of dimensions that happen. And even the COVID situation, to me, it was like, hello, people, like no one predicted this, but it's in that sort of, if you're into socio-ecological resilience and surprise and disturbance and all these, it's like, yes. And yes, there's uncertainty that operates. And yes, it's not just a public health issue. You have to think about this. And there's an equity. Well, of course, there's an equity issue. So I was telling our students, and I was like, look, we focus on, we've got our 5 competencies that we work on, like other sustainability programs. And it's like, you can't solve this without thinking about strategically. You can't think about values. You got to be, anticipation. You have to work collaboratively. These are the fundamental things that everyone is going to have this sustainability mindset for us to exist in the world. And more people are recognizing that. And then, yeah, carry on, be a public health major. Absolutely, because I'm not going to tell you about public health. I'm not going to tell you about religion and faith, because you have to be somebody in that realm, or English literature. But I think at most of what we do, certainly among the practitioners of the world, if we're going to exist in the world, and I think it's becoming more and more clear to people that the sustainability thing isn't just a little niche thing that people over in the corner are doing. It's fundamental to how everyone lives their lives.
And if I can build on what Geoffrey just said, in Iowa for over a decade now, we issue a climate statement a year, and it's a collaborative process, very organic typically, and we then get signatories from this year. I think we had over 200 people signing. So this year our statement was about COVID and climate change and the parallels between those two, and how we need to promote resilience to address in a just way climate change and COVID. And so it's an example of what Geoffrey was talking about in terms of thinking systematically, holistically, about these issues. And I that's what I think we need to, the statement started very, a decade ago, very science oriented, right? It was a bunch of people, climate scientists, right? And now it's more like, hey, the social sciences need to be integrated in this. And we want the humanities too, because we want to tell stories in ways that people can really relate to and appreciate. And so I think that there has been an evolution, right? Science is not static. Our definition of what science is not static. And so I think we are making strides in terms of really understanding that picture in a more more comprehensively and more justly, I think.
Absolutely. We have a couple more questions that I really want to make sure we get through, but I am writing my own questions, and I know we have a few coming up in the panel here. So, so the next question is, how do you continue to evaluate and update your efforts to be the most effective through your teachings and activities? That kind of springboards off of our earlier question about resources and things, but any other thoughts to kind of continue on with that?
I guess not. I think we kind of answered that one earlier. I can't think of anything else I would add to all of our answers about how we keep ourselves updated. Again, relying on our colleagues in that collaborative process. And,
Okay.
and I will say thank you to everyone now. So at some point you're going to just see me disappear because I'll be at Grand Valley State University Climate Change Education Solutions Conference on an 11 o'clock panel there. So I apologize for not being able to stay through the Q&A. So you'll see me disappear in a minute or two.
Well, we've really appreciated you being here and being a part of this collaboration. This is something new that we just recently started. So hopefully it's something that we'll be able to continue going forward, and glad to see that you're working up at Grand Valley today or virtually. All right. So
I will add something
ahead,
that I haven't mentioned before, and that's the civic mindedness. So I really try to not just be in a class or be in teachers, but to be involved civically. So in Asheville, I'm part of our Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment. When I was at Michigan, I was part of the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition. And to me, being parts of those organizations are very grounding, because it's like, these are folks who are trying to solve, they got to deal with the day-to-day. Here's a city, here's a county that has to solve a problem. And so it enables me to be grounded to say, okay, here's what we do in the classroom. Is it really relevant to what, a city manager has to deal with? Is it really relevant to an organizer with the Sierra Club? Because they're trying to figure out information. It's like, oh, well, if we can do a GIS project and, go to EJ Screen and pull up some data, the student's like, why do I have to do this? And I can say, oh, well, I can just tell you why, because here's a situation where they're trying to do X or Y. And so I can also see the gaps and saying, here are the problems that people are trying to solve on a day-to-day basis. What am I doing to help students to be prepared to take that on? Or what am I doing as a faculty member? Great, I just had this publication or a book chapter. I think it's really relevant, but how do I explain that and put that into context? And so if I'm behind the times, then it's pretty evident to me that I am, because there's a gap between what I'm just doing in the classroom and what the city of Greenville needs. Or, if you are able to participate in a United Nations panel, again, you hear what they're talking about and what their gap is. And then I can sort of come back to the students and say, look, this is why we're doing what we're doing, or this is adequate, or it's not adequate, or something like that.
Hi, Denise. Thank you. And Geoffrey, I think that's an excellent point to bring up. I know, like when I was in college, I was very off put by politics as oh, I don't even want to be a part of that whatsoever. But then it seems like it's becoming more and more apparent how important that civic engagement is. I mean, whether it's voting, especially in local elections, and participating in local committees and boards and things along those lines. And I see our students really starting to get a hold of that earlier than what I did in my career, in my education. I think that that's really excellent. And I think it's important for faculty and staff to really kind of showcase that to our students too, about the importance of being active in those kinds of things. And the opportunity for making a difference. So that's, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so what trends are you seeing from your perspective in environmental justice, and how are you integrating them into your classes or initiatives on campus?
Well, I'll start, and I'll say that here at Iowa, we certainly are seeing the students pushing for more of this organic integration of environmental justice in the curriculum. And for me, I think that it's their demand will have to create a supply, right, of materials within courses. And so, to me, what I see is their interest and their absorbing what is happening outside the ivory tower and academia, in terms of issues related to, from water. In Iowa, we have a lot of water, but it's all gross, right? Lots of gross water. And in Iowa, we grow more pigs than anybody else in the United States. And those pigs are slaughtered and butchered largely by minority immigrant populations. And those are the populations that have been disproportionately affected by COVID, for example. Slaughterhouses are hotspots for COVID transmission, right? Very little workers' rights, labor issues, illegal immigrants, there's all sorts of things that we see in the state where we can really reflect on these environmental justice issues. And so I think that's where we're going, and really uncovering and reflecting how close to home. I know you in Michigan, you've had lots of issues with water, right? All of the upper Midwest, we really have problems with the overuse of our natural resources. And there is an intrinsic component. There is a history behind that lack of justice, right? I don't actually do a land acknowledgement. I do a whole class. In all my classes, I start with a whole class on the history of Native American land expropriation in Iowa. So I think this is where we need to go, like in terms of our mindset, and the trends that I see is incorporating these issues more fully and organically in our curriculum.
And Geoffrey, did you have any comments about any trends that you're seeing from the environmental justice movement coming into and incorporating into your classroom?
Yeah, one thing that probably 10 years ago I was involved in that it seemed like I was in the minority. And when we talk about environmental justice, and the field was based on this idea of maldistribution of environmental bads. And so whether it's hog farms or landfills or air quality issues, and like that was environmental justice. And I was viewing it, yes, that's true, but also the maldistribution of environmental goods. And I think that's been the biggest shift that I've seen, that people are recognizing it's not just about looking for pollution or bad things, it's also about who gets access to the good things. And so that's been the biggest shift that I've seen. And now I think people are recognizing a broader view of this idea of environmental justice. And so the idea of green gentrification has come into, we've had books on it and talks on it now, or people are acknowledging that's also an environmental justice issue. So if I don't have some of the good parts, you mentioned the dirty water, but who's got access to the clean water? Okay, so that really becomes an issue. Who's got access to the parks that have more ecosystem services attached to them? That's also environmental justice, as opposed to these are the ones that are impaired. And so typically when you go to environmental justice, you look for impairments as opposed to looking for assets and who has access to those. So I'm happy now to see that that's just what it puts that in more. Whereas, like I said, 5-10 years ago, when I would bring that up, it was like, okay, that seems interesting. Moving on, let's focus on that. So I think more people are accepting that's also an environmental justice issue.
I would say I totally agree with Geoffrey, and I would add that I think we're understanding better, and it's more apparent that these are very long processes we are at the end of. There is historical injustice, right, in that distribution of resources. And so the recognizing that we have created institutions in the United States, I'm thinking about the 1619 Project, for example, that have really created the conditions that then have been maintained or enhanced for this uneven distribution of resources. So how we address this fundamental historic processes, right, that are at the core of, so that we tell ourselves who we really are, not who we think we are in the United States, right? American exceptionalism is not the exceptionalism Americans often think about, right? It's not something they want to hear, but this is a nation founded on slavery and Native American genocide. And to understand these historical root causes, to me, is fundamentally is fundamental to then solving or meaningfully addressing the issues that we face.
Absolutely. I think those are exceptional recommendations and things to be kind of keeping our eyes open for. And like we said, I think these things have just become even more apparent. And Silvia, as you said, I mean, these are historical things that have just been put in place and just kind of hammered in, and people have just kind of continued with it as the status quo. And so I think people are finally starting to wake up a little bit more and realize that these things aren't okay, and we need to start making changes now so it will be better later. I hope the process will not continue to be slow for sure. But there's definitely lots of great work happening in these areas. Okay, so we do have just a couple of minutes, and we have one Q&A question. Oh, it looks like they may have been answered out here, maybe virtually. Okay, so it looks like you guys have kind of shared those. And then Justin, Laura already put that in there about the next session about starting at 11:30. We'll also look deeper into his question as well. So we just have a couple of minutes. I don't think we have any time for some of these deeper dive questions, but I just have one kind of lingering question. Do you guys ever seem to get pushback from using the term sustainability or anything along those lines? It was kind of referenced earlier that there's like this grab that we're kind of trying to take over the world by putting it all under this hat of sustainability. But so what is your reflection or your message back on that? I mean, in terms of using these words like sustainability and environmental justice and things along those lines. Do you think that they kind of overlap, or do you think they should be still kind of segregated out separately? Kind of a big question, big messy question for you.
Well, I'm just happy being in the field that it's definitely used more often and there's less pushback. I remember, 10 years ago when the UN came out and there was all this pushback against, the United Nations and sustainable development and the movement where people were trying to ban the use of the words in local government and municipal planning. And I don't really hear that anymore. Even the climate stuff, there's still people that are, pushing back a little bit against the climate stuff. But I think as long as you kind of move forward, people recognize that the weather's changing and there's flooding. And if you're a farmer, who cares? They're not interested in the blame game. It's, my planting is being delayed. Let's try to figure this out. And so I think there's less baggage around that. I still think, because sustainability, that word existed before, the Brundtland report, there's still people that are using that and they're thinking about, business from a financial standpoint. Is my company sustainable? In other words, is it going to be around 30, 40 years from now? So that still continues. And so I get excited. Oh, they're going to talk about sustainability. And then it's like, oh, you're really just talking about financial. And is this company going to be around? Or is our city going to have enough taxes to pay for schools? Mm-hmm. But I think it used to be that was always the confusing thing. But like I said, I started with this idea of, the social component of people thinking about, environmental justice as being an environmental issue, whereas sustainability is not. And we know that they're linked together. But yeah, you can compartmentalize them for sure, because not every sustainability issue is an environmental justice issue. But not every justice issue necessarily is a sustainability issue, but I think it's probably more of that than the other way around. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm more, positive about the idea of sustainability and people accepting these sorts of issues. I think you mentioned the 1619 project, and certainly this year in the US has been a pretty deep reckoning. And so, recognizing this idea of institutional or systemic racism, I think it's coming to roost. So where we talk about it's important to go back to the causes as a system thinker, and people aren't really interested in that. They just want to deal with the symptoms. And this is making it more clear that you can continue to try to do that, but if you're not really trying to get at root causes and recognizing, which I always is a struggle with students, because they say, well, so-and-so didn't mean to do that. And it's like, probably not. But when you look at impacts, here you have the distribution of goods and bads and who suffers more often. There's a pattern here. So that's a problem. It's not to say that it's my fault or the mayor's fault or you name it's fault, but it is a fault if you don't recognize this is what's going on and this is the pattern that's led to this. And so if you don't want to go all the way back to slavery, we can go back to redlining back in the early 20th century. And it's like, that has implications for wealth and why people are in certain areas. So that's why they're living in polluted situations. And here we are. And so you can clean up the pollution, but you can't pick people up and move them, or that's what happened. People got picked up and moved because of these other situations. And it's still coming to roost today. So as a sustainability person of thinking, I don't really need to think about the historical nature of that. Like I said, I think this summer, a lot of that is coming to bear to where I think people's eyes are being opened to these are the systemic institutional things that are happening. And it's not just because they're bad people. I mean, I think there are in general, very few bad people out there. But even I am in part of, and I think Silvia mentioned that if you're part of an institution, the way I assign grades, that can be racist. Well, how is that? Well, you're an African-American. Yeah, but if I buy into the system that this is how you judge and evaluate people, well, then I'm participating in that process, which is a hard thing for people to recognize, that you're being part of a process, even though that you might not have that same value. What you do leads to the same outcomes.
So I have to say that because I have 3 degrees in economics, I used to get a lot of pushback on sustainability issues, right? Because economics is very regimented, right? So, I from my personal experience, a couple of things I would say. First of all, is if you know you're right and you're confident in what you're doing. Actually, I actually got tenure in an economics department, and the first thing I did is move to a geography department because they were much more receptive to interdisciplinary approaches and incorporating the kind of issues that I'm interested in, right? So you can't change, you don't have to be beholden to certain perspectives, right? You can stay true to yourself and your values, and you can't change things. So, and that's the way I did it. And I would say that a lot of the people who 20 years ago were kind of like poo-pooing this interdisciplinary or this more holistic, now they come around. And whether it's because NSF funding is really, pushing for these kind of approaches, interdisciplinary approaches, incorporating this more social sustainability elements. So whether it's because they're chasing the money, whether it's because they've seen the light, I don't care. As Geoffrey was saying, it's more about the impact of these activities. But I have seen a lot of change around, appreciating and understanding the limits of disciplinary approaches that really can mask some of these big issues and hide some of the problems that the way we do things continue to really, economists tend to be like, this is like overall society benefits, and we're not very good at looking at who within that society is benefiting and who within that society is losing, right? This kind of like distributional impacts and disproportionate effects, and catering to understanding the historical processes behind these things. So I have seen progress in that respect myself.
And I'll agree. I think that it is coming around. People are starting to be more receptive of these ideas and this collaboration for one reason or another, whether it's chasing funding or anything, but I am glad to see that progress is happening. So we are a few minutes over now, but I really want to take the time to say thank you to both of you for being a part of this. I could really talk to you probably for another hour or two going on. And I hope I can reach out to you guys and follow up with some of the questions and things like that, that I've been taking notes on. But thank you for being a part of this today. And for those of you that are listening, we're going to take a brief break here, and then the next session will be starting at 11:30. So thank you all, and happy Earth Day 50.5, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.